He sang about love, loss, and wisdom, but behind the scenes, Kenny Rogers carried grudges he never shared with the public. Known as the gambler with a heart of gold, a silver-haired legend with broad appeal, the reality behind his friendly smile and beard wasn't always as calm as his songs suggested. In Nashville, rumors surrounded him, tensions with fellow stars, silent betrayals behind closed doors, cold stares at award ceremonies. Yet, Kenny kept the drama private, until now. After his death in 2020, former friends, collaborators, and rivals began to speak out. Kenny Rogers had 6 enemies, not just critics, but fellow legends. One duet almost ended in a lawsuit, another star labeled him a sellout, and one refused ever to mention him again. What really went on behind the stage lights? And why did Kenny choose to keep it all so quiet? The feud that surprised even his closest fans was with Dolly Parton, the smile that hid the sting. As country royalty, their duet Islands in the Stream made them icons. Their warm, effortless chemistry suggested a perfect match, even if purely professional. But behind the scenes, whispers told another story. Some say Kenny felt like the lesser partner in their duet. Behind closed doors, he grew tired of playing the straight man to Dolly's dazzling personality, the steady anchor to her captivating charm. The tension wasn't dramatic but slow, quiet, and deeply personal, hidden beneath smiles and stage lights. It wasn't just about pride, it was about his sense of self. Kenny was a country music giant long before Dolly became an international star. But after they joined forces, everything changed. He was no longer just Kenny Rogers, he became Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton. In interviews, he joked and praised her, but those close to him say he resented how every TV appearance, press tour, and awards ceremony turned into Dolly's spotlight. Though he was the legend, he felt like her sidekick, always there, always polite, but never the main attraction. To the public, the change was subtle, but to Kenny, it was clear. The final hurt came during a well-known TV show when Dolly jokingly said she would never date him because he wasn't her type. The audience laughed and cheered, but those who knew Kenny say the joke cut deep, not because he wanted her romantically, but because she made him the punchline, the guy she wouldn't date, the lovable sidekick. It was meant as humor, but it left a sting. When the cameras stopped rolling, the silence spoke louder than the laughter. He hid his pain behind a smile but never forgot. They remained friends for decades, performing in Christmas specials, touring, and singing heartfelt duets. The magic stayed on stage, but off stage their closeness slowly faded, like a dimming light as the show went on. Though Dolly hurt him emotionally, the next person on this list wounded him where it mattered most, his music. Lionel Richie, once like a soul brother, gave Kenny one of his biggest hits, Lady. The song topped charts and helped Kenny cross over into pop music without losing his country roots. The collaboration seemed magical, at least from the fans' perspective. But behind the scenes, things were quietly falling apart. The tension simmering between the two superstars was much deeper than anyone realized. Once it started, there was no going back. Initially, there was mutual respect. Lionel admired Kenny's voice, and Kenny trusted Lionel's songwriting. Publicly, they praised each other with the grace expected from two legends. However, once recording began, their creative visions reportedly clashed. Lionel, known for his perfectionism, wanted to take greater control of the production. He gave detailed directions, even trying to shape Kenny's phrasing, tempo, and emotional delivery down to the breaths. Kenny, on the other hand, was a veteran artist with decades of hits. He knew how to craft a chart topper and wasn't willing to be micromanaged, not even by Lionel Richie. The conflict reached a breaking point when Lionel re-recorded Lady as a solo track without informing Kenny. Fans were shocked, and Rogers was reportedly furious. To Kenny, this wasn't just a new version, it felt like a betrayal. He was blindsided, as if their shared song had been taken and rebranded without him. It was like their history together had been erased. Suddenly, the phone calls stopped and their partnership ended. What could have been an iconic collaboration faded into cold silence. No visible tension, but no warmth either. Years later, when Kenny was asked about working with Lionel again, his answer was short and dismissive, no plans for now. Friends say this wasn't just polite talk, it was the honest truth. A once promising friendship had quietly fallen apart. There was no reunion, no closure, only a hit song and a closed door. While Lionel faded away quietly, another country legend made sure everyone knew his feelings about Kenny, Waylon Jennings, the outlaw who called him out. Waylon Jennings didn't appreciate smooth ballads. He was gritty, unapologetic, and wild. His music was rebellious, not crafted for radio play. When Kenny Rogers' polished pop country sound took over the airwaves, Waylon bluntly dismissed it as bubblegum garbage. This wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration of war on the direction Nashville was heading. Waylon wasn't just criticizing the music, he was warning that the soul of country was being lost, one soft ballad at a time. To Waylon, the rise of crossover stars like Kenny marked the death of true country music. He condemned the industry's shift towards slick production, neat melodies, and gentle lyrics. Kenny, with his trademark beard and smooth voice, became the unintended symbol of what Waylon and the outlaw movement despised, commercial sellouts. For Waylon, Kenny wasn't just part of the problem, he embodied it. At first, the divide wasn't personal, but it soon became that way as their worlds drifted apart with every chart-topping hit. Kenny stayed diplomatic and never responded publicly, but those close to him said Waylon's insults cut deep. Kenny wasn't just criticized, he was dismissed and ridiculed by a fellow legend. The barbed comments kept resurfacing in interviews and documentaries, reminding Kenny that in some circles, he was seen as a traitor to country tradition. And that sting, coming from someone who had once shared the same stage and spotlight, was far more than just professional rivalry. It was deeply personal, a rejection of Kenny's legacy by someone he once looked up to. Their tension was so intense that it seeped into their professional lives. They never worked together, had no duets, and showed no public signs of friendship. When they were once booked to perform at the same festival, Kenny reportedly insisted on separate dressing rooms, not out of diva behavior, but to avoid any confrontation. This shows just how cold their relationship had become and how firmly the line was drawn between these two country music legends. No one dared to bridge the gap. But as frosty as things were with one, the next conflict was even more bitter, marked by a silent snub Kenny never forgot. George Jones was as cold as a classic country ballad. A purist and a giant of the old-school sound, George lived and breathed the raw emotion that defined traditional country. When Kenny Rogers gained fame with a smoother, crossover-friendly style, George saw him as a symbol of country music's decline. To George, Kenny wasn't upholding tradition, he was repackaging it for mainstream appeal, smoothing out the rough edges of a genre meant to express deep pain. Behind the scenes, their rivalry went beyond musical differences, it was personal. At a major awards show, insiders said George outright refused to shake Kenny's hand, ignoring him completely. At another high-profile event, George reportedly left just before Kenny took the stage. These actions were clear statements, echoing loudly throughout the country music community. George Jones did not respect what Kenny represented. Kenny remained composed publicly and never responded directly, but those close to him say the snubs hurt deeply. He had great respect for George's legacy but felt unfairly judged. Kenny worked tirelessly to blend genres and introduce country music to a broader audience. He wasn't trying to erase tradition, just broaden its horizons. However, George saw this as a betrayal, an erosion of the genre's roots. When asked about tensions with traditionalists in one interview, Kenny said, "Some people like to look backward. I've always been more of a forward guy." Though he didn't mention names, many believe this was a subtle dig at George Jones, who never fully accepted Kenny's style. While country legends typically stood united, the divide between these two remained firm. Kenny's conflicts extended beyond traditionalists, even collaborations with pop artists were challenging. One notable clash was with Barry Gibb. When harmony turns hostile, Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees co-wrote Islands in the Stream, a defining duet of its time. It became a chart-topping hit, beloved by many. But behind the scenes, recording the song was far from smooth. It was a clash of vision, control, and ego, two perfectionists trying to guide the same project. Studio staff recalled Barry and Kenny butting heads from the start. Barry brought his signature disco-pop sound, a polished rhythm filled with tight harmonies and groove. Kenny, however, wanted a grittier feel, a soulful, slower ballad with more emotional space. Both men had strong artistic instincts, and neither was willing to compromise easily. The sessions dragged on for hours, filled with tension, heated debates about tempo, and clashing opinions on the mix. At one point, Barry reportedly left the studio quietly, without a word, leaving Kenny and the production team scrambling. There was no shouting or dramatic confrontation, just a silent exit that said it all. For Kenny, who cherished harmony in both music and relationships, the tension was draining. Despite the turmoil behind the scenes, the final song was a masterpiece. It climbed to the top of the charts and became a timeless duet. However, the collaboration came at a cost. After the song's release, Barry and Kenny never worked together again, no reunion, no second duet. Although Kenny publicly expressed gratitude toward Barry during interviews and onstage tributes, insiders noticed one thing: Barry was never invited to collaborate again, even as his songwriting began influencing newer country artists in the late 2000s. The silence between them was intentional, not accidental. To Kenny, the music was worth the struggle, but repeating the partnership wasn't. While Barry had conflicts in the studio, the last name on this list had clashes in the green room. Years of spiritual tension and cold rivalry separated Flary Gatlin and Kenny, gospel brothers no longer. Both came from gospel backgrounds and fought their way up Nashville's competitive music scene. On paper, Kenny Rogers and Larry Gatlin should have been allies, two soulful voices molded by faith, family, and Southern life's rhythm. But behind the scenes, something never quite fit. The tension between them was colder than any chart competition, harsher than a snub, and deeper than a rivalry. Some say it started with competition. Larry Gatlin, known for his sharp tongue and confident swagger, wasn't one to be humble. Kenny, polished in public, reportedly disliked Larry's brash attitude. Others believe it was more personal, a battle of egos between two men whose musical identities were too large to share a stage. They weren't just different, they were opposites drawn to the same spotlight, each unwilling to stand in the other's shadow. Multiple sources confirm they avoided each other at events, refusing to pose for photos together, share green rooms, or even make eye contact backstage. One CMA Awards producer recalled a particularly tense moment when seating charts were announced. Upon seeing Larry Gatlin's name next to his, Kenny immediately said, "Then I won't be there." That wasn't drama, it was a clear boundary, one not to be crossed unless you're ready for war. The clearest indication came late in Kenny's life. When asked to name artists who shaped his career, the inspirations, allies, and companions, Larry Gatlin's name was noticeably missing. Not a mention, a nod, or a whisper. Whatever had happened between them was never fixed, never resolved, and never forgotten. For Kenny, the journey was about more than success, it was about survival. These 6 names were scars he carried with him until the very end. Though Kenny Rogers appeared as a gentleman in public, beneath that charm was a man with a steel-trap memory. He never raged in tabloids or battled through lyrics, but he remembered every slight, cold shoulder, and backhanded compliment. He logged them quietly and precisely. He never lost control, but he never forgot. From subtle betrayals in the studio to harsh jabs on live television, Kenny bore the weight of these 6 names like invisible scars. Because he couldn't let go, but because each one told a story, a lesson, a warning. For decades, he bore them all in silence, never naming names, never playing victim. But now, the silence is broken. Which of these rivalries shocked you the most? Do you think Kenny was right to stay silent, or did it cost him too much in the end? Drop your thoughts below and hit that subscribe button for more untold secrets behind country music's most legendary icons.